I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong, not with my life, but with how I was living it. It happened on a random Tuesday, sitting in my car, engine still running, even though I had nowhere to go. And for some reason, I just didn't want to get out. For most of my life, I thought I understood happiness, not in a deep philosophical way, but in a practical, everyday sense. I believed happiness was something you built, step by step. You set goals, you work hard, you achieve them, and eventually you feel good. That's what I had been doing. I had a stable job, nothing exciting, but it paid well. I lived in a decent apartment. I had friends I saw occasionally, family I talked to on weekends, and a routine that looked normal. From the outside, everything made sense. But inside, something felt off. Not dramatically off, not the kind of sadness that people notice. It was quieter than that. It felt like background noise, like a low hum that never fully went away. I'd wake up, go through my day, check off tasks, come home, scroll through my phone, watch something, sleep, and repeat. And every now and then, usually late at night, a thought would slip in. Is this it? I remember brushing it off most of the time, telling myself I was just tired or overthinking. Because honestly, what else was I supposed to feel? This was the life I had worked toward. This was supposed to be enough. The strange part is, I wasn't unhappy. At least, not in the way people usually describe it. I laughed, I had good days, sometimes even great ones. But there was something missing that I couldn't quite name. And the more I tried to fix it, the worse it got. I started setting bigger goals. Maybe I just needed something more exciting to work toward. So I pushed harder at work, took on more responsibilities, tried to level up my life. For a while, it worked. I felt focused, motivated, but the feeling didn't last. Every time I reached something I thought would make me feel better, it didn't. It was like chasing something that kept moving just out of reach, and I couldn't understand why. The moment in my car that Tuesday, it didn't feel dramatic at all. I had just finished work, nothing unusual about the day, but instead of driving home, I parked in a grocery store lot and just sat there. I don't know why. I remember staring at the steering wheel, noticing how quiet everything felt. And then a thought came up, clearer than usual. If nothing is wrong, why don't I feel right? That question stayed with me, not in a stressful way, just persistent. And for the first time, I didn't try to ignore it. A few days later, something small happened that I almost missed. I was at work, sitting across from a coworker, Mark. We weren't close, but we talked occasionally. That day, he seemed different. Not sad, not upset, just calm. There was something about the way he spoke, slow, present, like he wasn't rushing to get anywhere. At one point, I asked him how things were going. He smiled slightly and said, "Honestly, pretty good." There was nothing unusual about that answer, but something about it felt real. Not automatic, not rehearsed. So I asked him, half joking, "What's your secret?" I expected a typical answer, something about work-life balance or staying positive. Instead, he paused. Then he said something I didn't expect. I stopped trying to be happy all the time. I remember feeling confused. What does that even mean? I didn't say anything right away, so he continued. For a long time, I thought I was supposed to feel good, most of the time. And when I didn't, I assumed something was wrong. I nodded slightly. That sounded familiar. But then I realized, he said, I wasn't actually paying attention to my life. I was constantly evaluating it. That sentence stuck. Evaluating it. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but it felt accurate. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. I started noticing something about my own behavior. Almost everything I did, I was quietly judging. Even small things. If I went out with friends, part of my mind would ask, is this fun enough? If I had a productive day, I'd think, was it productive enough? If I relaxed, I'd feel like I should be doing something else. It was constant. Not loud, but always there. Like I was living my life and reviewing it at the same time. And no matter what I did, it never quite passed the test. That realization led to something uncomfortable. I wasn't actually experiencing my life. I was measuring it, comparing it, analyzing whether it matched some invisible standard of what happiness was supposed to feel like. And most of the time, it didn't. Not because my life was bad, but because it wasn't matching an expectation I'd never questioned. A week later, I made a small decision. Nothing dramatic. I decided that for one day, I would stop trying to figure out if I was happy. That was it. No big changes, no new goals, just observe. The first few hours felt strange. My mind kept trying to go back to its usual pattern. Is this working? Do you feel better yet? But I didn't engage with those thoughts. I just noticed them and let them pass. Something subtle started to change. I began paying attention to things I usually overlooked. The way my coffee tasted in the morning, the quiet moment before starting my car, the sound of people talking in the background at work. None of these things were extraordinary, but they felt real. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't asking if they were enough. Later that day, I realized something that caught me off guard. I felt lighter, not happier in a big, obvious way, but less tense, like something had loosened inside my mind. And then it clicked. The problem wasn't that I wasn't happy, it was that I was constantly checking if I was. That quiet, endless evaluation. It was creating distance between me and my own life. I wasn't living moments, I was grading them. Over the next few weeks, I kept experimenting with this idea. Whenever I noticed myself asking, is this making me happy? I would pause, and instead, I'd ask something different. What is actually happening right now? That shift, small as it sounds, changed everything because it moved my attention away from judgment and back to experience. I started noticing patterns. The more I tried to control how I felt, the more disconnected I became. But when I allowed myself to just experience things without labeling them as good or bad, they felt more complete, even uncomfortable moments, especially those. One evening, I was walking home after a long day. Normally, I would have been thinking about everything I didn't get done. But this time, I just walked. No headphones, no distractions, and I remember thinking, this is it. Not in a disappointing way, but in a simple, grounded way. This moment, this ordinary, quiet walk, wasn't something to evaluate. It was something to experience. That's when I understood the real reason I hadn't been happy. It wasn't because my life was lacking, it was because my attention was. I had been living in a constant state of comparison between what I felt and what I thought I should feel. And that gap was where the dissatisfaction lived. The fix wasn't about changing my life. It was about changing how I related to it. Letting go of the idea that happiness is something you're supposed to maintain, and realizing it's something that naturally appears when you stop chasing it. Now, I still have the same job, the same routine, the same life on the surface, but it feels different. Not because everything is suddenly amazing, but because I'm actually here for it. Sometimes I still catch myself slipping back into old patterns, measuring, evaluating. But now I notice it faster. And when I do, I return to something simple. Not a technique, not a rule, just a quiet awareness. Because the truth is, happiness isn't something you find by looking harder. It's something you stop blocking when you stop trying to measure it. And maybe the real question isn't, why am I not happy? Maybe it's, what am I missing while I'm busy trying to be?